What's up, Descendants? Bob here. Today I got my update video for my overcharged Sharen build. This is gonna be build 2.0, and this is a final build. There is one thing that I would have liked to change or add to this build, but I couldn't, and I'll explain to you why in a second. But everything else is finished, so that's why I wanted to show you the build. And the damage output for a single shot is not gonna change for this build. What's gonna change is kind of like a lateral movement. We're gonna be able to cast our overcharged edge more frequently, and it's gonna be stronger overall. And the reason is because we did a lot of changes to our shields to achieve this. And that's why at the start of the video you didn't see me fighting the Devourer or any boss, because the damage output is gonna be the same. What's gonna change is the DPS. So maybe a fight would have been good just to lower my overall time killing the Devourer. But overall damage per shot is gonna be the same. So that's why I decided not to do a fight and just focus on the build itself. If you want to see how fast I can kill Devourer with the Piercing Light with Sharen, I recommend that you watch build 1.0. But yeah, with that being said, let's get started with the build. Okay, Descendants, like I said at the start of the video, nothing changed on the Piercing Light. I mean, one thing did, just that I'm trying to get firearm critical hit damage on this weapon. Before I had firearm attack versus Colossus, and I feel like critical hit damage is better overall for outposts, for infiltrations, for every single type of bosses, not just Colossus, and that's why I'm going for that specific affix. Everything else didn't change. If you want to take a look, go ahead. This is my weak point expansion build, and this is my strength and first shot. The only thing that's changing between these two is that I'm using strength and first shot, and depending on the boss, I'm using different elements. That's why you see that I'm using different elements here. But in general, I'm just changing weak point expansion and strength and first shot. Like I said on my previous build, I generally do not recommend using strength and first shot. I only use this against a Devourer because it's gonna show us the maximum amount of damage possible with a single shot. And with this module, we were able to achieve 9.4 or 9.5 million damage in the previous build. So that's not gonna change. Nothing changes on the Piercing Light. What's changing though is our reactor and our external components and our modules for our Descendant. So for our reactor, I think I didn't change it, but I have this one that it's optimized for the Piercing Light, and it's gonna give me skill cooldown and skill critical hit damage. What I'm mostly interested is skill cooldown. Skill critical hit damage, it's a nice bonus, but I'm not gonna be using skills with this build. I'm only gonna be using the invisibility or overcharged edge in this case. Anything else, I'm not gonna be using it. Well, I'm gonna be using it, but for something completely different, and I'll explain to you in a minute. For our auxiliary power, we're using the bravery one and the bravery memory. The reason is because I'm trying to get as much shields and as much defense as possible. And this one is going to increase my max shield by 12% and our HP recovery by 2%. So that's going to be great for bossing, because we're going to be consuming our shields for damage. And I'll explain to you why in a minute. For our sensor, we're using the shield enhancement. It's going to give us shield recovery out of combat and max MP. The memory is going to give us defense and shield recovery in combat. And the processor is going to give us shield recovery modifier. And that's it. The other one, we don't care about it. What we're trying to achieve is increase our shields as much as possible and our shield recovery. And the reason why we want to increase our shields is because we're going to be using it as a resource. So that's the main reason why we're going in full shields on the external components. Okay, now let's talk about the builds that I have for you guys. And I got a couple of them. I have a bossing build that's also useful for infiltrations. And I have an outpost build, which is exclusive for outposts. The reason is because we're not using conditional recharge and we're not using overcharged edge. The reason is because we don't actually need them. We do not need overcharged edge because we don't need the extra 50% damage for outposts in general. And it's only going to hurt us because our active camouflage is going to go down by 4 seconds for our duration. And that's the reason why we're not using overcharged edge. Otherwise, we would have had to invest more on skill duration, which I don't think it's worth it. Honestly, we can do perfectly fine with a single duration module. And then since we're not using overcharged edge, we don't need conditional recharge. So we're gonna be a little bit more tanky as well, or survivable, because we're not using either of those two modules. So this is gonna be a perfect build for outposts. Now let's talk about the modules for the bossing build. Like I said, on my previous build, I'm using Overcharged Edge, which is gonna increase our damage for our invisibility. Our invisibility regularly gives us 150% more damage, but with Overcharged Edge, we get an additional 50% more. 200% in total, which is huge. The cost is that we're gonna be spending our shields to benefit from this. At maximum, we're gonna be spending 50% of our shields, and that's why I decided to spend as many resources as possible on our shields, because we're actually gonna need them. And by spending more resources on our shields, we're gonna be able to increase our shield recovery, our shield capacity, and at the same time, we're gonna be able to increase our damage output, because we're gonna be having more shields more frequently. That's the reason why I decided to go full shields for this build. And it's gonna be a little bit more squishy, I'm not gonna lie, but the damage output is gonna increase by a lot. Now let's talk about the rest of the modules for the build. For the first one, we have mirror maneuvering for mobility. We have increased defense and iron defense to increase our defense. And this one is gonna give us also a skill power modifier, which we don't actually need, but I would have preferred actually to go with HP conversion. The reason why I didn't go with this module is because I believe it's glitched. Let me show you. If we use it, our HP is gonna drop to 1, and we're only gonna be able to cast a single skill to recharge our shields. So that's why I'm not using that module for this build. I'm gonna be using iron defense, which is not gonna give us as much defense as the other one, but it gets the job done, and we're gonna be a little bit more survivable, which is what we want. Then we have increased shield and HP conversion. Both of these are gonna give us more shields, more shield capacity. And this one is gonna reduce our max HP by 52.4%. That's why we wanted to invest more in our shields, because we're gonna be a little bit more squishy. Then we have nimble fingers and MP conversion for more skill cooldown. Max MP minus 15% with MP conversion, but it doesn't really matter. We're not gonna be using that many skills. We're only gonna be using them for our invisibility or to recharge our shields. That's basically it. We're not gonna be using our 4 or our ultimate. So having a little bit less max MP capacity, it's not gonna matter that much for this build. It's gonna be a firepower build. Then we have skill extension. This is gonna increase our skill duration by 36.5%. It's a little of quality of life for the build, because it's gonna increase our active camo duration from 5 seconds to almost 7. Which is gonna be nice, because you're gonna be able to either recover your shields in that time, or you're gonna have a little bit more time to focus on the boss and actually get a nice shot to do more damage. Then for the next module, we're using conditional recharge, and this one is gonna be very important for the build. We basically made the build to use this single module, and I was trying to use actually a different one. I was trying to use Shield Collector. It ended up not being as good as conditional recharge, and the reason is because for outposts, we don't actually need overcharged edge. So Therefore, we do not need conditional recharge. We do not need to recover our shields as much. We could actually use shield collector for this build. That way we're increasing our builds, our shields in outposts. But for bossing, conditional recharge, it's definitely hands down the best option that you have. It's very expensive to use. We're gonna be spending 12% of our HP to recover 17% of our shields. So we're gonna be very glass cannony with this build. We're gonna be spending a lot of our HP, and that's gonna be very important. We're gonna have to be very careful with how we're spending our shields. But the benefit is that we're gonna be doing way more damage more frequently. Unless we're using multi-talented, we only care about the first sentence of this build. When using the dimension active skill cooldown minus 20.5%. That's gonna bring our skill cooldown from 6 seconds to 2 seconds, which is massive. As you guys can see, I still have a single Descendant module available, and I already upgraded it to Cerulean. The reason why it's empty, it's because this spot is specifically saved for shot focus. This module is extremely hard to get. I was not able to get it in 3 days. It's extremely tedious. The reason is because to get it, we need to combine Descendant Cerulean modules to have a 7% chance to get this module. And at its max level, it increases our firearm attack by 15%, which is not a lot, but for this specific build, I thought that it was gonna be perfect, because we're not using damage skills, we're only using our overcharged edge. So it would have been perfect, but honestly, I gave up. It was too much of a grind. Like I said, I spent 3 days farming for this module, and it's incredibly difficult to get. I didn't find a single place to farm for Cerulean Descendant modules. The best place that I was able to find was on the Bunny Cave. And that one doesn't even give us Cerulean Descendant modules. That one gives us regular weapon Cerulean modules. Which, what I was trying to do was change those weapon Cerulean modules to actually Descendant Cerulean modules, and then combining them to have a chance to get the shot focus module, but no, it's almost impossible to get, and I would not recommend farming for that specific module if you do not have it. Just farm for it as you're playing, because if you're gonna be spending your days just to get this single module, you're gonna be wasting your life, honestly. Don't do it. I do not recommend it. Instead, actually level up your characters, do something more productive than just getting an extra 15% more damage. Not worth it in my opinion. Alright, with everything covered, now let me show you how the build actually works. But before we do, let me show you our stats. We have 5,500 max shields, and we have almost 32,000 defense, which is gonna matter a lot for this build, because it's kinda like a glass cannon build. We're gonna be using our shields as a resource with our overcharged edge. And to show you, I'm still doing the same amount of damage, like I said. Still 9.4 million damage. But the difference is that I can do way more damage than before, because our shields are recovering more frequently. As you guys can see, my shields are almost full. They're already full. So now I can do the extra 50% damage again. If I spend another skill, and then cast Overcharge Edge again. Overall, the damage output with this build is gonna be way bigger than previously with build 1.0. And shields recover extremely fast. I'm almost full capacity again. And if you're dying, just use your active camouflage, run, hide, do whatever you need to recover your shields, and then continue with the fight. And one more thing before I end the video that I want to mention, it's that there's a couple of Descendants that are extremely good when paired with Sharen. And that's gonna be Enzo and Kyle. Enzo, because he's gonna give Sharen infinite ammo. And if built correctly, he can also give Sharen 100% crit chance always, which is gonna be massive for overall damage output. And paired with Enzo, I believe that strength and first shot is gonna be the call. But if paired with Kyle, I think that you're gonna be better off with weak point expansion, because we're gonna be a little bit more hungry for ammo. But the trade-off is that we're gonna be having our shields at 100% always, because with a well-built Kyle, with his magnetism spurt, he can recover 100% of our shields just with a single tap of his magnetism spurt, which is huge. That means that we're always gonna be able to do an extra 200% more damage when we cast Overcharged Edge. So Kyle and Enzo, extremely good when paired with Sharen. As to who's better than the other, I believe that Enzo is gonna be better. The reason is because he's also gonna give us ammo. So overall, Enzo, he's gonna contribute more to our DPS. And that's gonna be all for this video, Descendants. If you liked it, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps out. And if you guys want to see more videos for the first Descendant, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Later.